Good morning, everyone. I'm Richard Matovu from Texas Tech University, and today I'm going to be presenting our work, Defensive Charging, Mitigating Power Side Channel Attacks on Charging Smartphones. This is joint work of myself, Dr. Serwadda, Dr. Bilbao, and Isaac. Our work shows how users can mitigate power side channel attacks while charging their smartphones, especially in public places. In my presentation, I will give a brief background and motivation for public mobile charging stations and then show how an attacker can leverage them to infer sensitive users' activities. I will then show two defense mechanisms we designed to mitigate such attacks and lastly give some concluding remarks and future direction of our work. As we are all aware, or we might be aware, nowadays users run a wide range of energy-intensive applications on their mobile phones, such as video streaming applications, gaming applications, to mention but a few. These applications quickly drain users' phone batteries and have created an increasing need for people to charge their phones. If people do not charge their phones, they would go with several essential applications that they need for their daily tasks, for example, navigation, which is often unacceptable, particularly when someone is traveling. And to meet this increased charging demand, there has been a proliferation of charging mobile stations. Many public places, such as airports, malls, and coffee shops, provide mobile charging stations for users to charge their devices. In this research, we show that an attacker can embed power measuring capabilities into this public mobile charging station and perform three side channel attacks that can infer sensitive user activities. And we then design two defense mechanisms to defend against these attacks. So as part of this research, we make the following contributions. First, we designed and evaluated three power side channel attacks on the smartphone charging process, that is the website inference attack, the keystroke inference attack, and the incoming call detection attack. Then secondly, we designed and built a hardware Scrambler unit that throttles the above attacks, and in practice, the Scrambler unit could be incorporated into the conventional charger. Then lastly, we designed and implemented a software solution which could also defend against the above attacks. So in our work, we conducted three data collection experiments for each of the three power side channel attacks that we implemented. And the attack experiment was used to illustrate the attack themselves. And the second experiment was the hardware defense experiment, which was similar to the attack experiment, except that the power traces were collected while our hardware scrambler was deployed. And the setup for that experiment, the hardware defense experiment, is the one which I show on the top right of this slide. Then lastly, we had the software defense experiment, which was again similar to the attack experiment, except that now the phone was running the software defense that we implemented. To generate our performance results, the data that we collected from the attack experiment was used to evaluate the performance of our attacks. And in this case, both the training and the testing was done using unperturbed power measurements that we collected. And the results that we obtained were used as a benchmark to evaluate the impact of these defense mechanisms on the attack. Then for each of the attack, we evaluated it under, for each of the defenses, we evaluated it under two scenarios. The first scenario was the attack versus the defense scenario, which covers the case of an naive attacker who is unaware of the defenses that could be used against this attack. And in this case, the attacker trains his classifiers using unperturbed power traces and then tests using perturbed power traces. And then in the second scenario, the defense versus defense scenario, which covers the case of the sophisticated attacker who anticipates that the victim uses a defense mechanism. And here we train and test the attack algorithms using the data that was subjected to perturbations. So first I'm going to dive into the details of the power side channel attacks themselves, and then I will go to the defenses. In our attacks, we leverage the power charging side channel, and we designed 3 power side channel attacks that can be performed on phones charging to infer sensitive user activities. In specific, we designed the website inference attack, which is able to infer websites being visited. Then the keystroke inference attack, which is able to infer the keys pressed on the number keypad on the phone. And then the income call detection attack, which is able to tell if the user is receiving an incoming call or not. And all the attacks use machine learning to identify the unique patterns that are hidden in the measured power traces that are collected while the user is charging their phone, and then we are able to infer using the machine learning to infer information about the user's activity. Unlike many other attacks in literature, our attacks do not require malware installation on the phone since they are performed on the charging station. The attack threat model that we assume in our attacks is that the user performs sensitive activity, for example, browsing on the website, browsing a website, while the phone is plugged into a malicious USB charging station. And this charging station could be in any public place. The charging station then collects power traces and sends them to the adversary, who in turn uses them to infer personal information about the user. And in our work, we are able to infer the keys pressed by the victim, the websites visited, and whether the user is receiving an incoming call or not. So before implementing our attacks, we conducted a preliminary experiment to gain some insights into our attacks. And here I've just provided an example for the websites being visited, but we observed similar patterns for the other 2 attacks, the keystroke inference attack and the incoming call detection attack. With the plots on above on this slide, we can see that for the 3 different websites, we see unique patterns for each of them. And then for the last 2 plots, we can see a similar pattern, and this is because we are visiting the same website, which is YouTube. And this we observed also for the other attacks. And having got these insights, then we went ahead to design machine learning algorithms to be able to identify these unique patterns for each of the activities. To implement our attacks, we use the following generic workflow. First, we collected data and then pre-processed it. And then we went to feature extraction, and here we extracted 14 features from the pre-processed data that we got from the first stage. And these features consisted of 9 temporal features and 4 spectral features, as shown in the table on the slide. And then lastly, we performed the classification, where we evaluated the performance of a variety of classification algorithms in the Python machine learning framework, that is scikit-learn. And in all the attacks, the random forest and the SVM relatively outperformed the other classifiers. And so we use these 2 classifiers for our performance evaluation. This slide shows the overall performance of our power side channel attacks, and we can see for each table represents each of the attack. And we can see that we attain an average F-score of 71% for the website inference attack, then 26% for the keystroke inference attack, and then 99% for the incoming call detection attack. And this is on the first guessing attempt, and these scores increased as we increase the number of attempts. These results generally indicate that the adversary, we can leverage power measurements from a public charging station, e.g. one placed in the airport, to infer sensitive information about you. Next, I'm going to give a brief overview of how our defense mechanisms work, and then I will dive into details in each of them in the next slides. Since the attacker uses patterns in power traces collected at the charging station, both our solutions are designed to distort the power traces collected by the attacker. The defenses, the way they work is they add random perturbations in the power drawn by the phone during charging, and then by distorting those perturbations, by adding those perturbations, then we are able to mask the identifying patterns of the user's sensitive activities. And so these are the details for the hardware-based defense mechanism. Here we built a Scrambler unit that leverages a microcontroller to randomly switch load resistors on and off. This randomly draws the current that masks the true signal properties. And to achieve this, our Scrambler uses 10 load resistors with varying resistance values. And depending on which resistors are on, then it would add a random load to the charger, thus altering the current that the mobile device draws from the power supply. And in practice, our hardware Scrambler would be incorporated into the convention charger, and this is what we refer to as the defensive charger in our work. This slide shows the performance evaluation of our hardware-based defense. And the figures on the left show for the website inference attack, where we vary the number of bits used in this defense, while the tables show the results for the keystroke inference attack and the incoming call detection attack. And here we only show the results when we use 10 bits, when all the 10 bits are used in our hardware defense, which is the maximum configuration parameter we had for our hardware defense. So the two plots on the left show the performance of the website inference attack in the two scenarios, which was the attack versus defense scenario for the naive attacker, and then defense versus defense scenario for the sophisticated attacker. And as you can see, for the attack versus defense scenario, when we use 2 bits in our hardware defense, it rapidly drops to about 20% and then drops more gently as more bits are added. And the attack performance then reaches 2%, which is the random guess at about 8 bits. While when we look at the sophisticated attacker scenario, which is in the bottom left, we see a less drastic drop in the F-score compared to the first plot. And this gentle drop relative to the previous figure is likely because the data used for each of the web instances in the different defense data, that is during training and testing, does not differ that much. And therefore, it's able to perform better when several bits are used. However, we can see that it drops to random guess, which is about 2% for a 50 website classification problem, in between 8 and 10 bits. And then for both the keystroke and the incoming call detection attack, which are the results shown in the tables on the right, we see again that the F-scores drop to about or below random guess when the 10 bits are used in our hardware Scrambler. Overall, these results point to the effectiveness of our hardware-based solution to mitigate this attack. Then for our software-based defense, we built a software solution that runs as a background service on the phone. It is automatically activated when the phone is plugged into the power supply during charging and automatically deactivated when the phone is unplugged. And because our software solution runs on the phone, we carefully designed it so that it doesn't overrun the phone resources. So by this, we first we ensure that it only runs in the background during charging, and then secondly, it adds minimal computation, just enough to distort the power traces, but does not log the resources. Our software defense was implemented with 2 components. One was the Java component that is activated and deactivated when the phone starts charging and stops charging, and then the NDK component that performs the actual image manipulation. And here we use the NDK component to get more precise and fine control of the memory. This slide shows the overall performance of our website inference attack in the presence of the proposed software defense mechanism, and the tables show the overall performance of the keystroke inference attack and the incoming call detection attack in presence of our software defense solution. Again, overall, our results show that our solution would be able to defend against the power side channel attacks that we demonstrated, because all the results go to below to random guess or below random guess. In conclusion, we demonstrated two highly effective measures against power side channel attacks on smartphone charging systems. And then in terms of future work, we hope we can investigate methods of counteracting our defense approaches and also exploring other potential targets for power side channel attacks. At this point, I will invite any questions. Thank you very much for listening.